The rain had stopped, but the storm was only beginning. By the third morning, the shelter's halls were lined with reporters, animal rights advocates, and skeptics. The story had snowballed into national news, sparking fierce debate across the country. But not everyone was rooting for Lila. Inside the shelter conference room, cold coffee sat untouched on a long table. Lila stood before 3 sharply dressed officials from the State Wildlife Board. Their faces were blank, their clipboards full. "We understand your intentions were noble," the lead officer said, not unkindly. "But policy isn't based on hope and viral videos." Lila's voice cracked. "But he's improving. You saw the footage." "Footage doesn't equal long-term recovery," the woman replied. "A temporary spike in energy doesn't change his prognosis. What you're doing here, it's emotional interference. It undermines our entire framework for ethical animal care." Dr. Marquez tried to speak, but they cut him off. "Protocols exist for a reason. This isn't a sanctuary. It's a state-funded triage center. The bear has 24 hours left. That's final." And just like that, they stood and walked out, their decision leaving behind a cold finality. That night, the air inside the shelter grew heavy. The monitors beeped slower. The optimism from the day before had faded into a quiet dread. Lila sat by Balthazar's cage, her hands tucked beneath her knees, eyes red from lack of sleep. She could sense it. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And then, just past midnight, it happened. The bear twitched violently, groaned deep in his chest, and collapsed fully on his side. Blood began to seep from his nose. His breathing spiked into ragged gasps. An alarm on the monitor began to blare. Staff scrambled in. Dr. Marquez barked orders. Lila was ushered away. "No, please, he was doing better," she cried, fighting to stay near. Inside the cage, the bear lay motionless. "His fevers jumped again, dangerously high," one nurse called out. Dr. Marquez clenched his jaw. "This isn't just pneumonia. Something else is happening." They prepped emergency fluids, ice packs, stabilizers, but none of it seemed to make a dent. Outside the room, Lila collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The weight of failure came crashing down. She had pushed so hard, believed so fiercely, and now it was slipping through her fingers. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I thought I could fix it," she whispered. "I thought if I just stayed with him, if I showed him he wasn't alone." She buried her face in her arms. Then a memory, clear, vivid, sharp like glass. The circus. That moment after he had been beaten, when she'd returned quietly the next day with her dad, just to watch from the front row again, hoping he was okay. She remembered sitting there as he entered the ring. Before the music started, before the trainer barked a single word, Balthazar had paused, looked straight at her, and tilted his head slightly to the side. Then he made a soft, low sound, almost like a huff. The trainer hadn't noticed, but Lila had. He was looking for her. He recognized her. Back in the shelter, she stood abruptly, wiped her face, pushed her way past staff, and rushed to the cage. "Lila!" A nurse called out. But she was already there, kneeling again, close enough for the bear to hear her voice. She tilted her head, just as he once had. Then she made that same sound, a gentle, breathy huff. Seconds passed. Nothing. She did it again. And then, a twitch. His ear flicked. Dr. Marquez spun around. "Do that again!" Lila repeated the sound a third time, and this time Balthazar blinked. Just once, but undeniably. "He's reacting," the doctor said, stunned. "He's still in there." Lila's voice shook with urgency. "He used to do that at the circus. It was his way of checking if I was there." Dr. Marquez knelt beside her, looking over the blood work on a tablet. Something clicked in his expression. "No, this isn't standard pneumonia. Not just that. These symptoms, fever spikes, nasal bleeding, aggression, collapsing lungs, it's parasitic." "What?" Lila gasped. A severe parasitic infection, probably from years of malnourishment in the circus. It mimics respiratory failure. It's been misdiagnosed this whole time. He stood up fast. We've been treating the wrong thing. Within minutes, he had new medications ordered. A broad-spectrum antiparasitic combined with adjusted antibiotics and fever suppressants. The treatment began at once. The entire room held its breath. Lila sat beside the cage all night, speaking softly, mimicking the sound every 20 minutes. The bear didn't move much, but his eyes flickered. His breathing grew slower, stronger. His fever eased from critical to high, then moderate. By dawn, something unbelievable happened. Balthazar lifted his head completely and rested it on his paws. Not forced, not spasm, voluntary. "He's stabilizing," a nurse whispered. Dr. Marquez exhaled deeply, finally allowing himself to believe it. He's going to pull through. The news broke before sunrise. Young girl saves bear. After misdiagnosis, doctors say her bond helped identify the real illness. He looked for me. Girl uses circus memory to help. Dying bear recover. Social media erupted. Overnight, a movement was born. Hashtags multiplied. Comment sections overflowed with tears and rage. People wanted answers. They wanted accountability. And, most of all, they wanted the bear to live. Outside the shelter, crowds gathered with signs. Truth over protocol. Let Lila finish what she started. Balthazar deserves to live. News crews set up permanent camps. Celebrities tweeted their support. Donations flooded into the shelter's overwhelmed website. Lila watched from the window in quiet disbelief. The world had turned. Her once impossible request had become a nationwide cause. But inside the director's office, things were more complicated. The Wildlife Board had returned, furious, embarrassed, and under massive public pressure. They offered a last-minute compromise. One final chance, but with strings. If he relapses even once, we step in. Immediate euthanasia. No hearings, no petitions. Lila nodded slowly. And, the director added, you will take full legal responsibility for his care. He will be transferred to your custody for observation. The old cattle shed behind Lila's farmhouse had never seen anything like it. Under a large white tent, now reinforced with wood fencing and motion-triggered cameras, a temporary enclosure stood nestled between two old oak trees. A shallow man-made pond sparkled beside a pile of pine logs. The air was still cool, spring just beginning to nudge the frost away. Inside the enclosure, Balthazar, now Bruno, named lovingly by Lila, slept with his head on a mossy stone, breathing softly. Lila stood nearby, holding a chart. She wore gloves now, and boots. A small stethoscope dangled from her neck, gifted to her by Dr. Marquez. "Temps stable again," she murmured, jotting down numbers. "Appetite good, movement increasing." Her mother, watching from the porch, shook her head in wonder. "You're turning into a little vet." Lila looked up, half smiling. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just really good at teaching." It wasn't easy. Every hour had its checklist. Every day came with risk. But Bruno was adapting. On day 3, he sniffed curiously at a fallen log and pushed it clumsily with his paw. On day 5, he lumbered into the pond, let out a surprised grunt at the water's chill, and splashed for 15 whole seconds. Lila and Dr. Marquez, who still visited twice a week, kept track of it all. "Behavioral markers suggest positive neurological recovery," he told reporters. "But I think it's more than science. I think he feels safe." Lila knew exactly what he meant. She had changed, too. Gone was the girl who hid in her own silence, who watched cruelty and swallowed her voice. In its place was someone who acted, who read vet manuals by flashlight, who learned to identify fungal infections, clean minor wounds, and calculate hydration ratios. Each morning, she greeted Bruno with soft humming, no longer from fear or desperation, but from love. And Bruno, in his quiet, lumbering way, greeted her back. But healing, as Lila would learn, also meant knowing when to let go. One afternoon, a letter arrived, Everwood Wildlife Reserve, a nationally protected sanctuary hundreds of acres wide, deep in the redwood forests. It was known for taking in animals who couldn't return fully to the wild, but didn't belong behind bars either. They had seen Bruno's story, and they had space. Lila read the offer 3 times, her chest tightening with every word. A safe haven, expert care, room to roam. She folded the letter quietly, tears welling in her eyes. Dr. Marquez sat beside her on the porch. "It's a beautiful place," he said gently. "He'll have other bears, waterfalls, trees, sunlight." "But I'll lose him," she whispered. He nodded. "Not lose, release." Lila didn't speak. She didn't have to. She knew he was right. Keeping Bruno here would be selfish. He was growing stronger every day. He needed more than a backyard enclosure. He needed freedom. Still, the ache in her chest was real. Letting go would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. On Bruno's final morning, the sky turned soft gold. Lila stepped into the enclosure alone, carrying his breakfast, berries, broth, and a few slices of watermelon. He rose when he saw her, moving slowly but steadily. His fur had grown back thick and dark. His eyes were alert now, curious. She sat beside him for a long while, humming. Then she spoke. "You were never supposed to survive," she said, stroking the air between them. "But you did, because you mattered, and you always did." Bruno let out a low, rumbling sound, calm, almost content. The transport team arrived just after noon. They parked carefully near the side gate, bringing a large open-air transport cage, wide enough for comfort, lined with straw. Lila walked beside Bruno as he moved toward it. No one rushed him. No one forced anything. He stepped slowly, pausing at the threshold. Then, unexpectedly, he turned. Lila froze. He reached his paw gently through the bars and touched her hand. The air caught in her throat. Her vision blurred. She rested her fingers lightly against his fur. "Thank you," she whispered. Then he stepped in, lay down, and didn't look back. As the truck rolled down the dirt road, past the fence line and into the world beyond, Lila stood in the silence of goodbye. But she wasn't alone. At the far end of the driveway, a boy, maybe 10, maybe younger, stood clutching a torn circus flyer. His face was red, streaked with tears. Lila walked over, curious. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. The boy nodded slowly. "I saw him once, at the circus, years ago. He did a trick with a ball, and the trainer hit him after. I always thought he died." Lila crouched beside him, her heart swelling. "He almost did," she said, "but someone believed in him." The boy looked up. "You?" She smiled. "Maybe, but I think he believed in me too." They watched the truck disappear into the hills. Weeks later, Lila sat curled on her bedroom floor, a rescued fox pup asleep beside her. It had been brought in by a neighbor after being found trapped in a shed. She was nursing it back to health, using the same syringes, the same patience, the same music. On the TV across the room, a new video began to play. Bruno the bear, his first steps in sanctuary freedom. Drone footage showed the lush green expanse of Everwood Reserve. Bruno wandered through tall grass, stood beneath towering trees. He paused at a flowing stream, dipped his muzzle in, and drank. Then, as if sensing something beyond the camera, he tilted his head to the side and huffed. Lila smiled, eyes shimmering. The fox stirred, nuzzled closer. The voiceover ended with a quote from Lila's interview. "Sometimes the smallest voice can change the fate of the voiceless, and rewrite the ending no one saw coming."